With offices in Radford and Blacksburg, Patrick K. Moore is a client-focused, community-involved law firm committed to you. If a legal issue touches your family, finances, or future, we can help. Whether it's real estate, business law, or estate planning, Patrick Moore welcomes the opportunity to speak with you about your legal issues.
Welcome, I'm Rose Martin, and we are right around the corner in Brookneal with Kristin Wright. Her Southern Gothic romance novel, Lying Beneath the Oaks, is her debut novel, and it is something special. So Molly Todd wakes up married in a Vegas parking lot, and there are so many twists and turns to this book, it's going to be a fun show. So I'm so glad you joined us. Thank you for inviting us to your home.
Oh, thank you for being here.
It's such a beautiful area out here. Tell me a little bit about the setting.
Well, where we are right now is my house, and it is way out in the country. My kids will, first thing they'll say is that we don't have any Wi-Fi at all.
Mom, how could you do that?
I know, right? It's yeah, super cruel. We have cows though, so there's that. But yeah, we're out here in the country, about 20 minutes from anywhere, and I think a good mile in any direction from pavement.
It's beautiful, though. It's beautiful. I don't know to be a high school boy, but it is beautiful. So, you know, I read that you would get choked up at the thought of getting your first book published. So here you did it, right?
Yep.
You did it. So is it gone from choked up to pinching yourself?
Still choked up every time I think about it. You know, at my funeral, somebody's going to say that I wrote a book, that I was an author of a book. And, you know, there's a book with my name on the cover, and it just, you know, you never really get tired of that. I mean, there's just it's a thrill. I mean, it really is a thrill.
Well, and congratulations. And I read that you were really touched that you wanted to leave some kind of legacy in the world for all the gifts that books have given you since you were a little girl.
Yeah, I mean, I've started reading. I don't remember learning to read. I mean, it was just, I must have been taught, but I've just read constantly. My parents would call my name from like a tunnel of another world and snap me back into the place where I was supposed to be, setting the table or whatever it was I was supposed to be doing. But books have been really important. You know, I've got all these books in my house. And there's that feeling like when you've been invited to too many potlucks and you've never brought anything, that I just wanted to contribute a book to the world and just have something that I could show I was part of it, more than just the appreciating.
Well, it's a wonderful book, and we're going to get to it in a few minutes to share it with everybody because we really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed every word.
Okay.
You're a wonderful writer. If I go back to what you as a young girl, Bobbsey twins, those were kind of those early influences?
Well, I won't say it was an influence. I mean, I remember reading those books, and just that's kind of the. I mean, Bobbsey twins are so old. They were my dad's. They were his copies from when he was a child. So I think the ones that I had been bound in the 40s, and so they were, you know, really, really old. But it's the story of a family with two sets of twins, and they solve little mysteries. It's kind of like Nancy Drew for younger kids.
Sure.
And I love those. And then I went on to Anne of Green Gables and Little House on the Prairie and all of the other, you know, just it's a way to escape into another world, to be somebody else, to live someplace else, to explore Prince Edward Island or the prairie or another time. You know, I always loved any book about time travel or the olden days. That's what I used to call them when I was younger. But yeah, it's just, I think probably my favorite influence was Jane Austen. I mean, there's Pride and Prejudice, and I love how she just tiny little observations of the little social things that people understand but you don't really comment on. And I loved that and thought it might be fun to try it.
And you did, and it's great. And I also read that actually you didn't even really need the birds and the bees talk, did you? You had already kind of figured all that out through, what, your mom's bookshelf?
Yeah, my mom is a huge reader too, and I have to credit her for teaching me to love books the way she did. But yes, she was a fan of the romance novel when I was a kid, and I, at first, sneaked into her room and borrowed them and put them back carefully where they'd been so that the spines were all lined up the way they were supposed to be, and she wouldn't know. And I learned many, many things that way. She eventually caught me, and instead of being angry or upset, she said, "Do you want this one?" And so she just started lending me books, and we that never looked back.
Oh, what a great shout out for your mama.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
And your parents were both actually English professors. Your dad was a copy editor. What was that like going through school and
Actually,
doing
my parents were both high school English teachers, and my dad taught high school journalism in the school where I was a student. And so it was kind of intense, to have write your papers and be ready to turn them in because you procrastinated and didn't do it until the last minute. And then he said, "Let me see that." And then, he would go through and mark
You're
it
like,
up.
okay,
Right.
I'm going to be up a while.
Right. Yeah, I was frequently up very late. But yeah, it was helpful to have English teachers for parents. And I remember them, grilling me about the grammar, and it's not me and I, it's me and you, it's you and I, those kinds of things. Actually, my dad read an early draft of this novel and got out the red pen and went through the whole thing, even the sex scene, and just, yep.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that a little bit later, which I think is hysterical because, think about it. It's raw, right? When you put your writing out there.
It is. And
then your parents are used to critiquing your work, where that's something different that a lot of people don't have.
Right.
So it's like, okay, then here we go. Ready? So yeah, well, that'll be fun to chat about. How about your boys? Would you see writers in them?
I do, actually. Both of them are very talented writers. They write sometimes a short story for school. My older son is plotting a book that is set in a fantasy world, and he's world building right now. I don't write fantasy, but I do know people who do, and that is actually a really important part where you sort of plot out what the world is like, what the rules of the world are, what kind of magic they have, that sort of stuff. And then my younger son likes more gritty kind of action stories, and so he's actually come up with a couple of plots for a potential action series. And so they do
fun.
actually sometimes sit down and write.
Yeah. Well, because there's no internet, remember? You've got them with no internet here. So
That's
so
right.
there's
I
a
know,
method
torture.
to your madness there. That's right. And how about your husband?
He has been super supportive. He is himself an excellent writer. He would say he's not. But he does say that he doesn't think he'd want to sit down and try to write a whole book. But he's been so supportive, and he's read all my books. And he was actually the reason that I tried to get the first one published. I originally started writing just to see if I could do it, because I was the girl who wrote, if they said the paper had to be 5 pages, I wrote 4 3/4 of a page. I mean, I never wrote another word beyond what the limits were of the assignment. But, I knew obviously a novel is much longer than that, and I wanted to see if I could do it, to write that long. And so when I did, I handed it to him and said, "Hey, I read and he read it and stayed up until 2:00 in the morning and then woke me up and said, "Oh my gosh, you are a really good writer and you should try." So yeah, I'll give him all the credit for saying go.
And wasn't there a story about the two of you on a walk in the summer or in sometime where you were describing people you don't even know?
Right. Yeah, I didn't try to write until I was, till my kids had gotten all the way into elementary school. I hadn't written a word of fiction since middle school before that. And we were just we walk every night or try to. And I was telling him about some lady I'd seen in the grocery store, and I concocted this whole backstory for her. I didn't know her, and was describing her, and he kind of looked at me and said, "I can totally see what kind of woman she is. I know exactly what she looked like. I can see her. I know what her whole life is like, and you gave that to me. You should really consider trying to write a book."
And so when you're thinking about that, I'm going to go ahead and write a book. The process isn't just I'm going to sit down and write a book and I'm going to send it off to print, is it?
No. Like I said, at first I wanted to see if I could come up with enough story to fill that many words. Right. I mean, a short story is one thing, but a full-length novel is completely different. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just kind of sitting down, trying to come up with enough story to fill it. And when you're finished, you think, wow, I'm amazing. I wrote this whole book. And then you read it over 2 days later and you're like, oh no, this is terrible.
I'm not so amazing.
Nobody needs to read this book. Nobody should ever see that. But that's what editing is for. I mean, if you edit and you can make it better. You can take a paragraph that's boring and cut it. You can take that paragraph and make it better, more interesting, give a character a few more layers, that kind of thing. And then people might want to read it someday.
And you have manuscripts that you've kind of tucked away that are just going to kind of stay private Word documents, or are they going to make their way out?
One of them will. That first one, the very first one, was a practice manuscript, and that stays in a drawer. But, the others I sort of still have hope one day might someday be books. I've written a couple of young adult novels, and those are not published, but it's a different genre, and, maybe someday I'll try to work on those. But yeah, there are others.
And with 2 young boys, when do you find time to write?
I write mostly in the back, in the driver's seat of my car, in parking lots, at soccer practice, at swim team practice, at waiting for cross country to get out. I do actually sit and watch the actual sporting events, but I feel entitled to the practice time to sit with my laptop and my computer. So that's basically it. I also write in the early mornings on the weekends, in the early mornings before work. Sometimes I'll stay late at work and write if nobody is needing me for driving, but usually they need me for the driving. And
the carpool mom to get from point A to point B.
Right.
So you also have a full-time job, and you're carting your boys around, and you're writing some amazing books. So where do they all kind of fall in? Are you thinking maybe transitioning to just being full-time writer?
I wish that would happen, but that is, I would say, probably 90% of all writers, even published, have day jobs, and you have a regular full-time job that pays your bills. Writing, like it or not, except for the very top, Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, it's not livable wage. I mean, what people are paid as full-time authors would shock most people.
So then why do you do it?
It's a way of being immortal, in a way. It's something I leave behind when I'm gone, a way for people who never met me to know me a little bit, and to, to do something that's just for me. The driving people around is for my kids. The cooking, the cleaning, the taking care of the house, all of that stuff is for my family. When I'm at work, it's for my employer, but this is just for me. And it's something that I can do just for myself.
I love that. It's like everybody needs to carve out a little something that's just for you,
even
to kind of preserve
not writing.
it. Yeah. Find what it is that you want to do.
I mean, some people are like that about cooking. I am not.
Right. But you found writing.
But writing.
But boy, you had an interesting series of jobs that you did getting to this point, right? I read an ice cream scooper. What were some of the others?
Most of these were in college or high school, but yeah, I was an ice cream scooper, an alarm monitor, a U.S. Senate intern. That was an interesting job. I was also a costumed living history interpreter at a Civil War era fort.
Oh, that must be where your love of hoop skirts comes
yes,
from, huh?
I love hoop skirts. Yep. So at one time I was super knowledgeable about just about everything to do with the Civil War.
So fascinating, but maybe that'll make it into some books for you, right, in the future?
Sure.
A little bit about Civil War. So let's get back to the process of that getting published and what that might be like, because you were involved in a pretty neat event, I guess you would call it, where the publishers kind of look at the pitches of pitch.
It's called Pitch Wars, and it's an online contest that started off pretty small, and the idea is that experienced authors who are either published or near publication or somehow affiliated with publishing will help new authors with their manuscripts, getting them ready to submit to agents for eventual publication. And to do that, they go through and really just go through it, full critique, line edits, the whole thing.
After you think you're finished.
After you think you're finished, right. So it started off as a relatively small thing, and I entered and got selected, and I had a mentor help me with my manuscript, and then I ended up getting an agent, a New York agent, with that manuscript. But now it's actually a huge contest, and last year I was a mentor. By this time, I've been a mentor 3 times now. And last year, it was 3,400 people entered the contest for 115 spots.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, it's really a big deal. And then I ended up choosing a really talented writer named Jane Igaro, and her novel was selected by an agent, and she had been signed with an agent within 24 hours after the contest was over, and then had a book deal in a month, and I believe it's coming out in 2020. So,
what a wonderful way to pay it forward.
Really, it's a great way.
Keeping that cycle going.
Yeah. Because not only do I like to write, but I also like to, well, it's a plus and a minus. I like to help other authors make their manuscripts better, and so I do have critique partners that I swap manuscripts with, and we do that for each other. But also, the downside is that you watch a TV show like Game of Thrones, say, and you say, oh, the writing of this is terrible. The pacing is all off. You just start critiquing everything you watch, you read, it can kind of damage your
and with
ability
two
to-
English teachers as
Right,
parents,
yeah.
I think that critiquing just comes naturally to you.
Probably,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's genetically predisposed
I would
right
think,
there.
yeah.
So your book, Lying Beneath the Oaks, how long did it take to come from the idea of getting it started, character formation, to getting it published?
The original inspiration was Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. And the idea was, well, what if I just took the idea of a new wife coming home with a husband she doesn't know well, and he's got secrets and family history. But what if I took it and made it modern and put it in South Carolina? So that's what I did. That was the original concept. And then from there, you kind of outline, you can come up with an idea. And it took me about 3 months, I think, to write it. And then about a year and a half to edit it into readability. So the writing part is fast and easy. It's the making it better that takes time.
The polish, those details,
Polish,
which
yeah.
is so important. So from Michigan to Virginia, to be set in Charleston, around South Carolina area, how did it get there?
We have gone to South Carolina for a vacation every year for the last 13 or 14 years and absolutely love it there. And so and it just, I don't know, there's something very gothic about it, the way the trees are.
Yeah, well, and that's what I felt reading it, that I felt, I've got to get down there to see what this is like. So let's talk about it, because the characters are amazing. And, thinking about Molly waking up in a Vegas parking lot, right, with someone so she's not sure about, was a little thinking, oh, where's this going to go? So you built in so many twists and turns and different characters. Did you know from the beginning how it was going to end or how things were going to play out, or did you have it?
Yeah, some writers can do that. They're called pantsers. Yeah. They just write by the seat of their pants. That's the name, hence the name. And they'll start off writing and just see where it goes. I can't do that. I like to plot it out and know that I have enough story to fill the book, and also how it's going to end and where the big twists and turns are going to be before I start. So yeah, I did know the ending. But yeah, the idea is, she's done the stupid thing that you always see, somebody's married somebody drunk in Vegas. But then she needs to get it straightened out. What's the practical way that you deal with that? She doesn't have any money. She's jobless and broke. So she follows him home to South Carolina, where he knows somebody who's an attorney, and they can get it straightened out. So from there, things get a little bit. Right.
Well, and the title, after I read the book, I went back and I'm like, oh, look, she's playing with this a little bit, right?
It has a couple of meanings.
Yeah,
maybe 3.
Lying Beneath the Oaks. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because you went back, and knowing the story now, I would encourage everyone who, when they pick up the book to read it, to think, oh, here's some interesting pieces. Just like some of the places you went to that they visited, we actually looked them up to say, is that a real place that really exists there? Yep. And of course, I've got to know about Carol Ann, my favorite character in this book. Can you guess who it is?
Miss Aurelia.
Yes. So where did she come from?
I don't know. I mean, out of my head. She's not based, sometimes when I write, I base characters on pieces and parts of various people that I know, and I combine them into one. But Miss Aurelia just kind of walked into my head as is, exactly the way she is. She has an unusual habit of writing all over her jeans. So,
but
I've never seen anyone do that. I just came up with it. So.
And I didn't get the feeling like she had to do that. So you kind of let us believe like she's doing that for others to kind of see what's going on, but she's really quite a smart, savvy woman.
Yeah. No, I think, every small town has an eccentric. That's a trope that you see in books and movies all the time. But I kind of wanted to play with that idea of eccentric. What does it mean really? And, isn't really that person kind of the person that we all want to be, in a way, where you can just do what you want. You can be who you want. You can say what you want. And then people will kind of react to you in whatever way might be most interesting. You know, it's most of us live by a lot of rules, follow a lot of rules, but those folks are, I'd kind of like to be her myself too one day and do what I want.
I agree. It's kind of like she says the things and does the things, like you said, that we want to do, but we just kind of pull back and be like, maybe I shouldn't do that, right? And she does. She goes there.
Right.
Well, and a matter of fact, there's one scene in here where you did kind of go there, right? And I love the fact that you asked your father-in-law to read it, and you said, if you're going to write a sex scene, do it as if you think your parents are dead.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're just too concerned with what they're going to think about it.
Right, exactly. Well, at a certain point, I'll talk about my parents and my in-laws, all of whom are still alive. Separately, my own parents, as I said, critique, and they are relatively calm about that. And at some point I was like, well, I mean, I am married. I have 2 kids. This should not come as a shock that I know these things. Also, my mom used to lend me the books.
Right. That's how you knew to begin
right.
with.
I mean, this is not something that they're going to get too worked up about. So I didn't really worry too much about them. But I did, I was a little more concerned about my in-laws because, they're not my parents, they're my husband's parents, but they rolled with the punches, and both of them have really enjoyed this book and have been recommending it to everyone they see. And my father-in-law was so funny because he said, yeah, it was a real good book. It was a bit bawdy, but I liked it.
That's right. You got the stamp of approval there. But you also embarrassed your son, right?
Yes, I did. My son is 15, and he is a sophomore in high school, just started sophomore year of high school. And he had a friend who is a girl who read the book last spring when it first came out. And she came up to him and said, your mom has a sex scene in that book. And he's like, oh my gosh, don't talk to me about that.
Mom, how could you? First no Wi-Fi, and now you did this.
I know, the therapy couch is going to be very interesting.
Well, and I also loved a part where you said, you probably think that some of your mom's book club ladies may have been a little surprised, or that you would get the pastoral visit with,
Well, there's any time you write a romance. I mean, and at the bottom, this is a romance. Anytime you write a romance, there are certain conventions that readers expect in the books, and one of those conventions is usually sex scenes, because if you don't have that, you get a lot of pushback. Oh, fade to black. I hate when they fade to black. So if you have that in there, but this is a small conservative community, and I don't know the reading habits of everybody I know, and you just never know. I mean, there's always the people that are going to get nervous about those things.
Well, and I love the story because of the romance, and Cooper really steps up. Mm-hmm. Molly's got some secrets.
Pretty big secret, yeah.
Yeah, and so, she's holding that, and yet she's thinking, this could be a dream for me, to be in this space and to fall in love with this amazing guy. And then his own family, I mean, you wove in some real interesting things with his family too that really kept me going. So, I mean, I opened it and I read it in one sitting thinking, well, I want to find out what happens next in the book. So when you were thinking about wrapping it up towards the end, so you said you always knew how it was going to end, but getting there with the twists and turns of the other characters and the players in there, was that just the process of figuring out how they were going to contribute?
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, I had written one ending, and then when I got the publishing offer, the editor said, yeah, we love this book, we love everything about it, we love the characters, but you just need to make the ending more exciting.
Oh, we're going to talk about that later, because I want to know exactly what you wrote for that second part. Yeah, we've got to figure that out.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's just, and that was it. That was the editing. I mean, I think people had this idea that editing is like where they tell you exactly what to fix. No, make it more exciting. That was my whole, okay.
Thank you, I'll do that.
Thanks, that'll be easy.
Well, it is exciting. Would you be willing to read for us?
Sure, absolutely. This is from the beginning, the very beginning. And it starts off, Chapter 1. Marrying a stranger was hardly the worst thing I'd ever done. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, they say, though I hadn't a clue how on earth that would apply to a legal marriage and a wedding ring that's too cheap to pawn and too nice to throw away. I woke up with a stiff neck in the thin white light of morning in the parking lot. Muscles screamed as I unwedged my head from the crevasse between the passenger side window and the headrest of a Ford sedan that smelled like 2,000 miles of cigarette smoke and Febreze. Some worrisome brown substance stained the front of my jeans and cheap pink scoop neck top. Only one flip-flop remained on my foot. On my left hand, a too big gold ring with a tiny stone of some kind slid toward my knuckle. My head throbbed and my vision twirled and twisted. This must be a hangover. I hadn't had one since I was a teenager because I'd always been careful not to get drunk, for fear of what could happen. I tried to swallow but came up short of saliva, and groaning with every millimeter, turned my head to glance at the driver's side. The intake of breath hurt my head. A man sprawled there asleep, his khaki pants and Vineyard Vines t-shirt rumpled and stained to match mine. He had messy chestnut hair with gold streaks, a straight nose over well-formed lips, a fit body, no noticeable tattoos or ridiculous jewelry. Something about him screamed to the manner born, maybe the khakis. They belonged on a boat deck or a golf course or something. He snored, his breath fanning fumes of alcohol that churned my stomach. He wore a gold ring on his left hand as well. Oh my God, what had I done? What had we done? What had I said? For a horrible, throbbing heartbeat, I couldn't come up with his name. Cooper, it clunked into place. His name was Cooper, though I had no idea what his last name was. I poked him. He grunted and shifted in his seat. Yep, I remembered right. His voice was low and rumbly and did things to me. Had we... Hey, I said, poking him harder. His upper arm was solid. What's going on? He muttered, backhanding his mouth and nose like a child. Apparently, I wasn't the only one with a hangover, because his eyes squinted tight in pain. They opened, revealing green-brown irises in a sea of red. I think you'll see what's going on when you wake up. I pushed on his shoulder again, holding up my hand to show off the ring. He sat up, blinking against the daylight in what had to be a whopper of a headache, and took in the situation. Oh, holy God. He looked at me, eyes full of remorse, and to my surprise, kindness. He stretched out his own hand where the matching gold ring told the tale. Did we get married? I think we did.
I think we did. Oh, gosh. I love the way the descriptive words that you put together, because I feel like I'm right in that scene with them and feeling everything that she's feeling. Thank you so much for inviting us here to your home and for sharing this debut novel with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Special thanks to Kristin Wright for sharing Lying Beneath the Oaks, her debut novel. Kristin wanted to make sure that she brought something into the world that she thought readers would get lost in. I know I did, and I think you will too. To find out more of our conversation, check us out online, learn more about Kristin, her work, and of course the twists and turns of this book. I'm Rose Martin. Tell your friends about us, and I'll see you next time, right around the corner. La, 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 la.